Hi, everybody. We're back. Today, we're discussing a real hero of cinema, a real hero of independent cinema, Roger Corman. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you, George?
How did we arrive at this show, the idea for this show, and what's it about?
Well, we discussed a lot of different topics, but the Roger Corman filmography, not only as producer and director, but as producer as well, has always been of interest, I think, to both you and me. And so we were talking about it, and it's common knowledge that a lot of big name Hollywood directors got their start with these very small budget independent films that he would produce. And it's quite interesting if you kind of put them all together and take a look at them about who came through this kind of wild west of filmmaking. And so it presents itself with a wide array of different genres and different filmmakers, and it's quite fascinating to take a look back.
And I think the thing, too, for me, that's always been impressive about Roger Corman and the story of Corman, as far as like what he means in Hollywood history, is not just like the massive amount of films that he created. I think something like 700 movies in his career, producer career, maybe more.
I don't know, that
Um,
that number gets thrown around a lot. I it seems like 400 is probably the closer estimate. I don't know. Maybe
yeah.
it varies depending on different things.
There's a lot to appreciate about Corman, his career, the way he worked, his system, and the amount of times that he restarted his career basically from scratch and continued to win and to traverse the changing landscape of film distribution. But the thing that I think he's most remembered for in the public, and honestly a good entryway into his oeuvre for newbies, is to talk about the amount of people who went on to be big stars in Hollywood who got their start with Roger Corman. So that's our show for today, is discussing four directors who initially made films for Corman who went on to do big things. But there's plenty of actors and actresses as well that got their start with Corman. De Niro, Jack Nicholson. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Charles
So
Bronson,
yeah, we're
Bruce
touching on
Dern.
four filmmakers today who got their start with Roger Corman in the Corman School, as people fondly refer to it as. Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Joe Dante, and what's the last one?
Martin Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese. Yeah, who could forget? But we'll go in chronological order here, and I think we'll first discuss a little bit of Cormanology. So, Ryan, what's your overall impression of Roger Corman? What was your first experience with him as a producer, filmmaker?
I'm a big fan. This is someone who I caught on to very early on. I would say like early teenage years. The main way that I figured out about who this guy was, I kept seeing his name everywhere, was you would go to like FYE, which was a DVD video store back in the day, and you would go to the dollar bin or the $5 bin, and it would be filled with DVD double features of these very old independent low budget films. And they would all, if you started looking at them or watching them later, you'd say they were all directed or produced by the same guy, and you started wondering, well, this is interesting, what's going on here? So that was probably my first exposure, and that's we're talking about probably his very early stuff, like the 50s and 60s output. A lot of the sci-fi monster movies like Attack of the Crab Monsters and Not of This Earth, or things like that, War of the
Yeah,
Satellites,
yeah.
stuff like that. That's very, very cheesy and schlocky, but if it holds up because it's endearing and it's crafted with care. And there's something that just as a kid, as a teenager, you can definitely appreciate and recognize that there's something there. So that's my exposure. How about you?
Well, I think that it's best to think of Corman's career, I think, in three phases, maybe four. He started out on his own as a filmmaker with his Attack of the Crab Monsters movie, and there was another one, Beneath the Surface of the Earth or something. And he caught the
Monster from the
attention of
Ocean Floor, I believe.
Monster from the Ocean Floor, his first directed movie. And so he caught the attention of Samuel Arkoff at American International Pictures. And he worked for him as like his primary producer until the early 70s, where he broke from them, became a true independent studio boss, essentially, with American International Pictures, which then, and in the
No,
books
with
I read,
New World, the New World
no,
Pictures.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
New World Pictures, which then inexplicably he sold off in the
Yep.
early 80s, and he started New Horizon Pictures.
Well, there's always an opportunity to make more money by selling off your company and then starting again, right?
He sold the library off, and then he started Concord New Horizons.
Oh, no. I believe he kept the library. If I recall correctly, he kept the library of pictures, but he sold the company.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, what was to buy?
The production, I don't know. There was no production aspect to it, but there was something, the name, the title, I guess. I don't know. There must have been some kind of assets there. But from what I was reading, I thought he kept the library of films.
Okay, that could be possibly true because I know that like Shot Factory owns the New Horizons pictures, and that somebody else owns the Concord, or sorry, the New World pictures, and then somebody else owns the New Horizons Concord pictures. But basically, under Concord New Horizons in the 80s and 90s, that's when he made a successful transition to home video distribution. Once the drive-in kind of dried up for him, he was able to pivot, and there are not many people in this kind of world that are able to pivot like that as a businessman, as a filmmaker, to know constantly what people want. And I think in a lot of these movies, basically all of them, I think you'll find are movies that are aping current Hollywood trends of the time. And I
Oh,
suppose,
100%.
yeah. So
These are all trend chasers. He was very adept and alert as to what was going on in the culture at the time. And he was always looking for what was hot and what can we imitate to get more pictures out there. Excuse me for 1 second.
yeah, please. But in a lot of ways, though, he did pioneer certain genres, like the motorcycle Hell's Angels motorcycle pictures. That was all him. I mean, that was an innovation of his that then led to movies like Easy Rider, which happened to get turned down by AIP, which I think was a big impetus for him starting New Horizons or New World. Sorry, I'm going to keep mixing that up. New World, because AIP wouldn't give him the money to fund Easy Rider, and then it went on to be the biggest, one of the biggest independent movies of all time, with an entire graduating class of his people that he could have had. So I think he strived for, and I think almost all the movies except for Dementia 13 are going to be New World pictures that we talk about today, 70s.
Yes, the Dementia 13 is still in the AIP days. And you can't really talk about Roger Corman without talking about AIP, in harmony, like you mentioned before. They were just starting up at the same time that Roger was starting up in the, mid to late 50s, early 60s. And so they found this perfect partnership with each other, whereby they were an independent distributor. They found an independent producer to make movies on the cheap for them. And it was a match made in heaven. And it's sad that it did, obviously all good things come to an end, but the Easy Rider thing, I think, seemed to be one of the biggest final nails in the coffin, or the straw that broke the camel's back, because Roger was all set to produce Easy Rider for AIP with, the people who were designed to make it. But I think it was Sam Arkoff that said, "Hey, listen, if this guy, Dennis Hopper, my bad. Sorry. If Dennis Hopper falls behind on one day of filming, you're gone. You're gone. We're replacing you." And this was like not considered okay at all. And so they walked away.
Yeah, which you can appreciate. But, well, I guess we can get started and we can sort of discuss Dementia 13 as a phase in Corman's career that I think parallels well. It's an AIP picture that's a Psycho ripoff, essentially, right?
Oh, yes. 100%.
Hey, thank you to Parker Longbow for the $10 super chat. That's very generous of you. Thank you very much.
Wow.
I think it's the first super chat I've ever got. So that's a big, that's a huge one in the history of the channel here. Thank you, Parker. But Corman also hired Richard Matheson to adapt several Edgar Allan Poe stories to film. That's how I found out about him. I was a huge Matheson fan in high school. I was about to talk about that because this was sort of his Edgar Allan Poe period, in which this sort of very trippy, experimental movie, Dementia 13, was made. Do you want to talk about Dementia 13, Ryan, and what you thought of it?
Yeah, Dementia 13 is Francis Ford Coppola's directorial debut. It was a movie that they made with leftover money that was left over from a movie called The Young Racers, which they were filming in Ireland. And Roger had a few $1,000s left over, so he gave it to Francis and he said, "Hey, got some money, write a script that's a Psycho ripoff and film it here in Ireland, and you got a movie." And so when you mention that it's a Psycho ripoff, not only does it feature, an axe murderer that goes around killing people with a villain who has, a psychosis, if you will, or a dementia for this movie. A lot of the characters are basically analog stand-ins for all the characters in Psycho, including the lead woman who is named Louise in this movie. She is kind of the ne'er-do-well wife of one of the brothers of a family that is very wealthy. And unexpectedly, her husband dies, not through anything that she does on her own, but she is a very suspicious character. She is considered like a gold digger, essentially. And her husband dies from a heart attack, realizing that she will get nothing because of his death, the way he died, the circumstances. She decides to cover it up and pretend that he's still alive. And so she is a stand-in for the Marion Crane, Janet Leigh character in Psycho, because she's kind of doing this conspiracy, if you will, or doing something shady, and is the first one to die at the hands of our maniac, who is Billy in this movie. He's our Norman stand-in. We also have a Lila Crane stand-in with the other brother's wife, and we have an Arbogast-like character who is the doctor here. So it's very, very clever that they just kind of aped all the characters in the basic story and made their own movie. Not as good as Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho by any means, but it's an interesting curiosity.
That's part of the fun part of watching these movies that are made by directors who are generally known for having a very hard directorial stamp. I would say arguably Ron Howard excluded from that list. But they're within the constraints of having to make a ripoff movie, but their personalities as an auteur and the things that would become hallmarks of their work tend to show up. You might be hard-pressed to identify that with Coppola in Dementia 13, but I felt like the movie had a lot of magical realism of the kind that we ended up seeing in Megalopolis. Think about when the flower falls on the grave and it dies. It's like very symbolic, very, but it actually reminded me a little bit of like some of the Giallo movies we watched last summer.
Yes, I was going to say that as well.
Blood a lot. It's almost like sort of a nascent Giallo effort with all of these conflicting rich characters, a secret murderer that we don't see. And then there's a lot of underwater things that reminded me a little bit of Night of the Hunter and that famous moment where the mother is underwater, roped to the car by Robert Mitchum. But overall, I can't say that I love this movie, but I found it to be somewhat compelling. And I get it within the lexicon of the Corman verse.
I liked it. I actually liked it more the second time I watched it, because the first time you watch it, you're like, what the hell's going on? It's kind of confusing and muddled, and you're getting confused about who is who and what's going on. I liked it much more the second time, as you start picking up as like, the first time you watch it, you're like, yeah, I see the Psycho elements here. But then when you fully watch the entire thing and then go back and watch it again, you're like, oh, I see completely what they're doing. Also felt a lot of, did you notice or feel it was a little bit like Diabolique a little bit too in here, the French film?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the underwater drowning in the bathtub and things. Yes, I did feel like it had a little bit of Diabolique, and it's got a really nice looking black and white quality to it that feels sort of unreal. Like when they're on the boat, they're obviously not on water, so it has this kind of like weird remove that is cheapness, but also makes it feel kind of ethereal.
Yes, absolutely. Great castle exteriors. I mean, clearly they're making the most out of what they've got to use for established sets. So there's that. Let's see what else. Oh, also, none of the actors here are anyone memorable that you would really notice offhand. But I noticed the lead brother, Richard, who I didn't mention earlier. He looked very familiar to me, and so I looked him up. He was on the classic Star Trek episode, The Squire of Gothos. He plays Trelane, who is the kind of omnipotent Mxyzptlk-like character who torments the Enterprise crew. So that was kind of cool too.
Okay, interesting. I did admire the movie. I thought it was cool. Coppola only made one film officially for Corman. Other than that, he directed Pieces of the Terror, but Monty Hellman also directed Pieces of the Terror, and Corman himself and Jack Nicholson, which The Terror, to give you an idea of kind of how Corman worked, it was a movie that was made on the same set as The Raven, one of the famous Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, which are all quite good. Mask of the Red Death being my favorite.
Agreed.
But they had the castle set for a weekend for free. So they invented a script. They filmed it using the set. It doesn't make any sense. It's a very disjointed and wild movie. I've seen it once, but it was a long time ago. And then that movie was reused as the 10+ minute opening credits sequence of a movie that we both enjoy, Peter Bogdanovich's Targets, that we talked about on this show in one of our early episodes.
Yes,
So
absolutely. The Terror is a wild movie. I remember seeing that as a teenager for the first time, and I thought it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen because I love Boris Karloff so much, and
sure.
seeing him in this movie, and then you just watch it again later, you're like, this movie is absolute garbage because there's nothing in it. It's all nonsense. But what's also interesting about that, the part you didn't mention, is that the key to it was they had Boris Karloff for like an extra day or two, and that was the
Oh,
impetus too. Is he had Boris for extra 2 days after the Raven, and so they're like, make use of this time. Just film him wandering around the castle, looking at stuff, and we'll fill in the gaps later.
yep. Yep, it's interesting. And then I love the piece too, which was in the documentary we watched, which was very good and very well done.
Oh, the
There's a lot of
Corman's World
yeah,
documentary.
there's a lot of Corman documentaries. I've watched a few of them. That's by far the best. They have the best
Yes.
interviews. They got Jack Nicholson to sit for it, and he actually tears up and cries at the end, which is interesting.
A lot of that is what's directly in this book, which is a great read. How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime. So a lot of it is like almost verbatim for the transcripts from here, which is really good book.
which I should read, and the one I read was by Beverly Gray, who was a former. It's a Roger Corman, the unauthorized biography by Beverly Gray, who was a former assistant to Roger, who, when she started to get too expensive, she was replaced by somebody else. But she holds no grudges because that's just how Roger was. He was a cheap
Well,
guy.
one of
You know.
Roger's big major producers was his wife Julie, which is kind of cool too. That his wife got into the act too, and she was a great producer. She really came into her own in the 70s. A lot of those women in prison pictures she was the producer on. Which one of the movies that we didn't include today, because we only have room for 4, is we could have done Jonathan Demme's Caged Heat. Was another big directorial debut for a
Right.
up and coming director. Of course, Jonathan Demme did Silence of the Lambs and Philadelphia, among many other movies.
And Roger Corman is in Silence of the Lambs. He plays the head of the FBI.
Oh, yes, and
cameo.
also in The Godfather 2,
Yes,
correct?
he is.
Yep.
Yes, that's
All
correct.
all of his former proteges, if you want to call them that, or people who worked with him, and he gave them their start as directors. Because obviously, to get your foot in the door as credited as the director for a feature film was it still is, but I'm sure even back then it was a much more
It's huge.
insurmountable task. And so he was willing to take a chance on people that he either worked with in other capacities, like Coppola being the sound editor or the sound director on his films, or Joe Dante being the trailer editor. Scorsese, I think he had seen student film, and Ron Howard obviously was one of the biggest stars on TV with Happy Days. So he used this to his advantage because these were cheap, but they were also young and fresh and innovative, and they were hungry to make movies that were not being made in the studio system.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of these movies were not just cheap ripoffs. They were different, or you couldn't have gotten them done otherwise.
Yeah,
Scorsese
you would
talked
not
about-
see
yeah.
a movie like any of these produced by one of the major studios at the time.
Especially the
And these
early
were all
AIP
movies.
stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Especially the early AIP stuff, like The Trip,
Oh, yeah.
or the Hell's Angels movies, the biker movies.
Or even the Edgar Allan Poe movies, for that matter, because
Yeah.
there was not a really big horror output from any of the major studios in that time period. We had stuff coming from international releases from like Hammer Studios, for instance, but we weren't really getting many American made horror films, big budget horror films. So there's definitely an area that was being neglected, especially for the younger audiences. That's also, we implied this, but we didn't really explicitly say it, is that these are all movies made not only by young people, but they were made for young people at the drive-in as kind of like a youthful rebellion, if you want to go in that direction or not. But it's definitely a market that was not being exploited by the majors, and now is the dominant market in Hollywood, where all movies are made for this particular audience, for better or for worse.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct. But, when he was at the drive-ins, it at least gave him sort of an appearance of propriety, because you could be a Roger Corman film and be at the drive-in just like any other movie, right?
Yes.
It was only when you came in to see it that you saw that the monster looked cheap or the monster looked fake. But the thing about Corman is that he gets lambasted as this cheap B movie guy. And I've seen enough of his movies to know that it's not just the influence of these like brilliant directors that made these movies look good and feel like they're of quality. Um, I don't find any of the stuff at New World to be laughably cheap. Now, obviously, I haven't seen everything, but the films we're going to continue to talk about, which are Boxcar Bertha, could have fooled me that that was some cheap, you know, slop effort to rip off Bonnie and Clyde. It's fabulous.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, if you talk about the early days, we're talking about the 50s and early 60s stuff, like we mentioned, Attack of the Crab Monsters, you know, movies like that. Yes, they look cheap, they look fake, they look phony. But there's still something there. There's still some spark of magic there. The movies that we're talking about today, there's nothing here that's outlandishly ridiculous or laugh out loud.
Nothing that looks like corner cutting or,
No,
you know,
no,
nothing
there's
at all.
nothing amateurish here that is like, oh, you know, that's pathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, are we done with Dementia 13? Do you have anything
Yeah,
else
one
to
final
say about
thought
that?
is for all the exploitative talk that we mentioned about these movies and Dementia 13 in particular, which features some very gruesome axe murders. One thing that they didn't rip off of Psycho was they didn't include the element of transvestitism, which you'd think would be one of the areas that you'd want to exploit the most if you're making an exploitation movie, but they didn't do that.
Yeah, that you
It's
could
just,
do.
oh, absolutely, yeah. So that was just kind of interesting point there.
That is one thing that you do see creep in, which reminds you that you're watching somewhat of an exploitation film. Is there's a little bit of gratuitous nudity, and Corman was famous, obviously, for circling parts in a script and saying nudity possible here. And
Yes.
in the book I read by Beverly Gray, there were women. Often it was her job to inspect new leading ladies to see if their breasts were camera ready or not, because that was part of the gig. Probably wouldn't fly today, but
Of course not. No. How barbaric.
um, anyway, Boxcar Bertha, Martin Scorsese's first film. It reminded me a lot of Bonnie and Clyde. This idea of being the gangster outlaw in the early 20s, a rebel against the system, was very hot. Corman also made another movie, Dillinger, with Warren Oates, that was an early directorial effort of John Milius. That's also very good, and it wouldn't surprise me if they reused some of the sets from that movie for this. They were made very much in a very similar time frame. But this is Martin Scorsese's first film. He worked on a few internet AIP pictures, including editing Unholy Rollers, sorry, which is a female roller skate derby movie, which I was planning on watching for the purposes of the show, but did not get around to. But this is Scorsese's first effort, and I thought it was just exceptional. I thought it was fantastic. Your thoughts?
Oh, I really liked it a lot. It was great. This feels the most professional and the most kind of artsy out of all the
Yes.
films that we're talking about. You just can't contain Scorsese, like, right?
You can't.
He's an animal. Like, it's
The
just,
best he's going to do it. But the best stuff, the ending of the movie, the last 20 minutes are just like phenomenal. There's a moment where we have what's her name, the actress?
Barbara Hershey.
Barbara Hershey. You see her through the screen window with water in the screen and light reflecting when she's working in the brothel. And then the ending when they're walking down the train tracks with the sunset. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It just
No,
looks
it's a
spectacular.
beautiful movie. And I
Yeah.
mean, when I'm saying it feels very artsy, not only because of what you just mentioned, but the material feels much heavier than what we're used to. And in fact, ending with the kind of the crucifixion scene of David Carradine's character, it
Couldn't
feels
believe it. So
kind of,
visceral.
very heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy.
So you mentioned Bonnie and Clyde, and that's immediately what I thought of when watching this movie, is that they're aping Bonnie and Clyde, which is very apparent. This was also a sequel, though, to the film Bloody Mama, which itself was also a Bonnie and Clyde ripoff, and which was one of De Niro's first movies. So there's
Well,
that.
is it literally a sequel or sort of a thematic?
They call it, they call it a quote sequel. That was what they wanted.
Sure.
They wanted a quote sequel to Bloody Mama, which was with Shelley Winters and Robert De Niro. What's also interesting is this time period. Have you noticed that there's this kind of in the early 70s, there was this nostalgia for the 30s, which is kind of, I didn't realize this, but I had heard about this in another commentary track when I was watching actually Murder on the Orient Express. Apparently there was a big desire to kind of have nostalgia for the 1930s at this time. And so, I mean, you think about it, it makes sense. Even in movies like we have Chinatown, A Murder on the Orient Express, and this is another good example.
Plenty of them.
it seems weird for us
The
because
Sting.
we're out of that time period completely. We have no experience, from our own lives. But it was
Yeah.
only 40 years, prior, and we're still mining stuff from older than that now for quote nostalgia.
Yeah, true.
Um, and definitely you got to love the score here, which goes full Monty on the fiddle and the harmonica. So can't deny that.
Folk music was cool, but the thing about the movie to me was just how visceral it was. I mean, you can tell that it was made quickly. There are certain moments that don't cut together correctly, or perhaps but somebody should have held this take longer, or we didn't get the stunt we wanted. But it really is a fun movie to watch. It's a great little caper about, well, not so much a caper, but it's like this montage of these friends, sort of the trio, and then we have Barbara Hershey, and she gets dragged along on a bank robbery scheme that's sort of uh
Well,
born
does she
of the
get dragged
fruitless
along? Would you really say that she gets dragged along? She is
no,
actually
never mind.
she's the leader. She's the
She
leader. She drags David Carradine along.
That's true, because he's just a humble sort of like labor movement, kind of like early 20th century,
Yeah, like a
who's the guy?
union leader. Yeah, labor union
He's like
kind
an
of
Upton
instigator.
Sinclair style, yeah, like liberal socialist, right?
Yes.
And yeah, this sort of a frustration of not being able to get their unions through legally ends up just in this kind of cross country quest to try to bankrupt the railroad, which fails because you can't get the man.
Yeah, you can't fight City Hall.
You can't fight City Hall. You're going down.
Which,
But
ironically, the bad guy in the movie is played by David Carradine's father, John Carradine. So it was a nice
right.
little touch there where you get to see them act together in a movie. I don't recall if there's other films where they're on screen together, but this was one of the few that I've ever seen
Our
like that.
second father and son duo, because Ron Howard's dad is in Grand Theft Auto as well.
Yep. What else about this movie? It kind of feels weird for Scorsese, who you normally think about, kind of New York City urban landscape films, to be doing this deep South rural picture, but he really makes it work. I think it's completely believable. Everything that we see here it feels very real. The whole thing, though, the whole Boxcar Bertha thing, it comes up in the credits at the beginning of the movie. It is based on the autobiography of Boxcar Bertha. Well, there is no such person, actually. Did you know that there is
No,
no
I
such
did not
person
know
as
that.
Boxcar Bertha? It was a
Planning on
fictional
looking into it.
character.
Oh, was Big Boss, was John Carradine's character or David Carradine's character, was that a real guy?
I don't think any of these people were real. They're kind of like amalgamations or hybrids of multiple people who existed at different
Okay.
times. So that found that kind of interesting. But also, I love the opening montage of the movie. That is a great addition. As we're doing the credits, you see that black and white newsreel footage kind of
Yeah.
intermixed with footage from the actual movie. You see a lot of stock footage with FDR and Depression era breadlines and stuff like that. So that was a great touch there. That feels very, very Scorsese to me,
Oh, there's so many touches in this that make it Scorsese. Think about, no, he doesn't pull off the gunfight as well as he does in something like Taxi Driver, as he would a few years later with Taxi Driver. This onslaught of one guy coming in and shooting a bunch of people. And every time someone gets shot, he's trying something new. Let me zoom dolly the camera in really, really fast. Let me have this guy flying backwards in a way that would anticipate, like, Hong Kong action gunfight movies of the 80s and 90s that Scorsese was really doing. He was ahead of his time with that kind of stuff. He just couldn't quite pull it off.
Oh,
But
absolutely. And Barbara Hershey is very good as Bertha. It's a character who goes on a real journey, both figuratively and literally, throughout the movie, including her sexual awakening, if you want to say, at the beginning of the movie, which kind of transforms her from childhood to adulthood, and then becomes who starts off as this very innocent character who is taken by the hand, so to speak, by David Carradine, and then becomes kind of the leader and the chief instigator behind the bank robberies. And it's kind of a transformational journey, and then gets the tables turned on her and is forced to becoming a prostitute by the end.
yeah, which is, I thought the ending was just fabulous. I thought it was
Oh
all
yeah,
beautiful.
no,
She's good, Barbara Hershey. I know she became a bigger actress in the late 80s and early 90s. She had like kind of a rough patch in her career. She married David Carradine, and I guess they were somewhat of a foil for like the tabloids
Yep.
for a long time.
She sure did. They were dating at the time the movie was made, though.
Okay. Do you know anything about that? Why their
Yeah,
their
and they
marriage
were
was so
together when they
acrimonious?
made this movie, so
Okay.
I don't recall now.
Okay.
David Carradine's an
Interesting. Well,
interesting guy, though, and of course,
I
the way he
he
died
very
too is
much so.
also quite
Yeah.
scandalous.
Yeah, he was killed by
So
a mob of
maybe there was
ninjas.
something about that. Maybe there's something to that in maybe why their relationship didn't work out. I don't know.
Possible. If we're not
Anything
coming
else
across
about
well,
this?
I think we're off a little bit on our signals. I'm hearing you talk, and I think there's a delay.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are we okay?
Yeah, I think everything's cool. But no, I was I don't know why I haven't seen this movie until now. I love Martin Scorsese. I've always put it off, and I've preferred to think of Mean Streets as his first movie. And I just kind of thought, well, he made it for Roger Corman. Probably doesn't have much of a directorial stamp. It was probably just a work for hire job. Plus, this whole idea of this, Boxcar Bertha doesn't appeal too much to me. But I thought it was going to be much more like I'm a badass, sassy woman kind of thing, and it's very much not that, you know. And it is very much a Scorsese movie. I mean, it's got this kind of violence that's sort of wanton and messy and really affecting, but it's also a very tender movie at times too. And I really enjoyed it.
The characters are definitely very multifaceted. They're not one-dimensional at all, and that goes for all the leads here. So, like I mentioned Bertha's journey and her development and changes throughout the film, but the other two male leads who are basically in this love triangle with her, one, David Carradine, is very much the alpha male. As we said, he's the union instigator, but also the card shark kind of confidence man that they pick up along the way, who she kind of gets as the not the fall guy, the rebound guy after she loses David Carradine. Then he immediately kind of gives her up in order to be in a subservient position in this group dynamic, which is quite fascinating there. And they all kind of stay together. So they all kind of go on their own emotional journey.
No, I would recommend everyone get out there and watch it because I was quite taken with it.
And I felt the same way too. When I remember when I first heard about this movie, I'm like, oh, it's probably good, but I don't know, not really interested, or it's probably like okay. And then when I actually saw it, I was like, wow, this is a great movie that everyone really should see. It's quite good.
It should be talked about more, and it's really not. I mean, I hear people mention it in passing as kind of like a curio, but
And what's
it
also
should be.
good is that all of the people that all of the directors that we are talking about in the films we're talking about, they're not ashamed of these movies by any means. And which you would think
No.
sometimes people would be like, oh, that movie, I had to make that one just to get started. But no, they're all very proud of these movies, and as they should be. They're very good.
Well, and Scorsese talks about what a help it was to learn from Corman, where I can't imagine the nightmare. He talks explicitly about the timing of trains moving and
Yeah,
having to coordinate scenes with that, which sounds like a nightmare, right? And
yes,
first of
very
all,
tedious.
for a low budget movie, I mean, a low budget period piece couldn't have been that cheap, right? I know we don't have
No,
big names in it or anything, but I mean, it looks great. They have great sets, great locations. They were able to crash trains. So, or, have trains hit cars and things. I mean, I
yeah,
was
I
impressed.
wonder. I don't recall seeing the actual budget for this movie, but I feel like this has to be one of the more expensive films that they did.
I would
Because
imagine his most
like
expensive.
the train crashing into the car being one of the biggest ones. I mean, I know they only had one, they could only do that in one take. So they only had one shot for that. But but still the costume design, it was filmed on location. There's a lot going on here.
I would say I think that his most expensive movie ever was Battle Beyond the Stars, which I believe cost him $2 million.
Okay.
His Star Wars ripoff. So
That was in the 80s though, correct? Early 80s.
early 80s, like 80, I think
Yeah.
1980 he came out.
Yeah, that's also, I've seen that one. That's pretty good. I enjoyed it. I enjoy a lot of those Star Wars ripoff movies from that
I
time.
was actually talking about that maybe being a topic for a show. I think that would be kind of a fun show.
And that's a lot of those movies are where James Cameron gets his start working for
Yes.
Corman.
Mm-hmm. Supposedly James Cameron saved somebody from being electrocuted on the set of Battle
Yes.
Beyond the Stars
Yes,
because
I've heard that story.
the New World studio, right, had like a bunch of leaks in the roof that never got fixed, and the guy almost electrocuted himself.
Oh, do you
Okay.
know both Siskel and Ebert reviewed these movies when they were working at the newspaper? Obviously, it predates the television show incarnation, but what do you think they thought of this movie of Boxcar
I
Bertha?
bet they thought it was amazing. I bet they thought it was great. I bet they praised it
Well,
heavily.
you're part right. It was split
Siskel didn't
decision.
like it.
Of course not.
Siskel didn't like it.
Of
Yeah,
course,
Siskel
Gene would
hated it.
not like this movie. Too violent,
Too
too
violent.
sleazy. Ebert,
Mhm.
thumbs up.
Why does Barbara Hershey have to be naked so much? And naked, not really even in a tasteful way at all. Like, she'll just be, like, naked in odd positions on the floor or, like, you know what I mean? Naked
Yeah.
standing up. Like, you know, it's very, all right, we gotta do it for Roger. He needs the nudity. Very beautiful in that movie, she is,
Have you
Barbara Hershey.
seen after he made the film? I guess Marty showed it to John Cassavetes, and he told him it was a great movie, but you just spent the last year of your life working on a piece of shit.
Really?
And he told him you need to get out and make real movies.
I would have preferred to see more Scorsese Corman productions, honestly, because Scorsese
I
is so
agree.
inventive. He's so inventive, and his brain moves a mile a minute. I mean, he could have thrived. Now, I'm glad that he broke out because in the documentary we watched, they talk about Scorsese gave Mean Streets and offered Mean Streets to Corman. He goes, "Oh, can you do it with black people instead?" Right? Because that's what's hot right now is
Yeah,
blaxploitation.
do
and
blaxploitation. Yeah.
yeah. And he was like, I guess, but it won't have me in it. You know, it won't be about my.
Yeah, I think he made the right call on that, on not on doing what he felt was right for the movie. But I do agree. I think when you have these very talented directors working with limited resources, you get a much better product in the end because they have to innovate and they have to use what they have to tell a good story. You know,
Yep.
it's all about the story, man. You know,
Totally. What's
quote,
next?
a favorite other
Yeah.
YouTuber that we both
It's
love.
all about we don't have good stories and characters anymore.
Yeah, it's about the stories.
We don't have strong female leads anymore, like Ripley. You know.
So, anything else on Boxcar Bertha? It's a great movie. Definitely recommend it
I
for
liked
everyone.
It was great. But yeah, it's sort of this period of Corman's in these New World days, he was doing a lot of exploitation movies like The Nurses. There's 4 nurse movies, which maybe I thought that would be a fun one to talk about.
That would be a really fun one to do. I have not seen those. Have you seen any of those?
No, but they're available, all 4 of them on DVD for like $8. So I thought about.
Oh, there's like a quadruple feature.
There's a quadruple
like Shout
pack,
Factory
yeah.
or something. Yeah,
exactly, a quadruple pack. So I thought about
Roger
maybe watching
Corman's Women in Prison.
I bet they're
Quadruple
great.
feature. I'm sure they're
Yeah, I bet
great.
they're
I
good.
mean, Julie Corman's also producing them. I love hearing her perspective and her talking about she obviously adores her husband and was very instrumental in producing all these films. So I love hearing her talk about it too. You know, and you get to hear the woman's perspective on this, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, she jumped right in, man.
Yeah.
So, Ron Howard, already a big TV star. He made a movie for Corman.
Biggest TV show in the country at the time. Happy Days was #1 at this time.
I didn't get a chance to watch Eat My Dust, which I think was his first effort with Corman as a big star in the movies, right? And I think it was
Correct.
a little, people don't appreciate how much more difficult it was to break out of television into the movies back then. So nowadays, if you're the star of a hit show, they'd probably give you a movie offer in Hollywood, but he got one from Roger Corman, and then he struck a deal with him where I'll star in one more picture for you, Roger, but you don't have to pay me any more money, but I want to direct. And he gave him the shot, and he made the movie Grand Theft Auto. What did you think?
Really good movie. Really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of Ron Howard. I know some of his directorial features are hit and miss, especially in the later years. But I think there's a lot to enjoy here. This is basically, if we're picking movies that these are aping, this one is It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, I would say, is what this movie is more than anything else. Yes. I also really like that Ron made this movie with his dad. It's really cool. Like, his dad was a huge part of shepherding Ron along from the early days. It was one of the few Hollywood child success stories where the parent was actually a positive influence in their child's career. It was not exploitative at all. It was actually a very caring, loving relationship between father and son, which is nice. And so even in the teenage adult years, they were still working together. So his dad, Rance Howard, was the co-producer, producer, co-writer, and cameos in the movie as well. So that's nice. Also, brother Clint Howard is in the movie, which is also nice, keeping everything in the family here.
He's insufferable.
You think so?
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, God.
It's
Every
okay.
time those two came on.
So
Yeah.
anyway, what this movie is basically a complete farce from start to finish. A teenage couple want to get married. The girl comes from a very, very wealthy family. The guy is from average middle class, working class. The parents don't approve, so they go on the run to go to Las Vegas and get married. And along the way, they steal her father's Rolls Royce. And now there's a bounty out on their heads to bring them back, including her supposed other fiance, who she never agreed to marry, whose mother is also played by Happy Days co-star Marion Ross. A very nice,
Oh
funny
yeah.
cameo there. Yeah,
Okay.
from Ron's mother on the show, Marion Ross.
Okay. Okay.
So, all this kind of little things where you kind of like, hey, anyone from Happy Days want to come on and be in my movie and help me out? It's I like stuff like that. It's fun. So along the way, everyone starts getting into the act of trying to capture these guys because there's, I think, a $25,000 bounty out on them, plus on the other doofus fiance who's after them too. So everyone starts stealing. They start stealing police cars. They steal city buses. They steal ice cream trucks. They steal everything. That's why it's called Grand Theft Auto. And at the end, it climaxes in a demolition derby, which is, worth the price of admission itself.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I have to say, I did get a little, after a while, I could only watch so many cars crash into each other before I had sort of like brain overload.
You can never see enough cars crash into each other.
When cars drive up a ramp and flip and things, then yes, or go off a cliff, which they do in this movie. That's always welcome. But just the like, oh boy. But the thing that I liked the most about this movie was the idea of the radio announcer who is broadcasting this story to the entire nation, and the nation is on the edge of their seat to see if these two lovebirds will make it to Las Vegas and evade the wrath of their parents and all sorts of other pursuers. It's got a lot of heart, and I was surprised, for a teen movie, it was very safe and family friendly. I mean, there's not a lot of bad language, there's no nudity. And it was really kind of cute and fun. And it reminded me a lot of, Corman is not necessarily known for his teen movies. I would say, do you know what I mean? He didn't make very many movies that were like teen exploitation films, not like Crown International Pictures would do.
No, and not like AIP doing the beach party movies and stuff like that. Yeah, he was not interested in that kind of stuff.
No, he wasn't at all, which is interesting because he probably would have made a mint, because this was one of his most successful movies. It was also one that got bought by CBS for $1 million to be the movie of the week on TV. And, it was a big success for him. And it showcases Ron Howard's talent as a director, I think. And if you look at Ron Howard's filmography, he can basically make anything, which he does. He's very much a workman style director who has repeatedly delivered success. I think he's underrated. I think he's an underrated director, but in this, I thought that his part was a little bit lacking. Obviously, he was very busy with directorial duties, so his role is basically to be in a car and react to things. I mean, he's in that car about the entire time. There's a nice moment where they get out and have a little bit of a, lovers quarrel, which is cute, where they discuss whether or not they really love each other and if they can make it in the cold world without her dad's money, etc. But overall, I found it to be very charming.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. And I mean, you can criticize that part where he's basically stuck in the car for the entire movie, but it's done out of necessity. And I think it works rather well that it gives him enough screen time to be in the movie. So you don't feel, cheap changed by, oh, you're going to see Ron Howard in this movie and he's in it for 5 minutes. No, he's in a vast majority of the movie, but, under the acknowledgement that he's also directing the movie, so he needs to focus elsewhere and not be running around doing outrageous stunts or anything like that. So he's just kind of sitting around for most of it, which I think is totally fine.
Yeah, it's fine because the mayhem and the chaos that ensues is a lot of fun, and we have a lot of wacky racer style characters.
Yes.
I was thinking to myself that it reminded me a lot of the Blues Brothers, but when you mentioned it's a mad, mad, mad world, I was like, yes, I knew it had to have some precedence in some kind of zany comedy of the 60s, which
that's what it felt like most to me. It's just it's a mad farce of everyone chasing each other for money basically.
Yeah, there's a bounty on them from her dad, which the legality of which I think is up for debate. But
and then of course, true love conquers all in the end. Even the parents, even the stuffy, uptight parents, realize that Ron Howard is not a gold digger. He has good intentions for their daughter. And he is the right guy to marry her, not this laughable
Yeah.
egotistical snob of a
Weakling.
brat, weakling,
Yeah.
yeah, who goes around with his polo hat and lance,
Riding crop and everything.
Yes,
Yeah. It's,
exactly.
which, what I have to say, I thought a lot of the little side characters who were the pursuers, their sort of one note antics kind of wore thin on me after a while. I thought the movie could
What
have been
about the
shorter.
preacher? The preacher's one of the best, the show
Preacher was
stealing.
good. I liked the radio DJ guy, and I liked how he inexplicably drove through a house in slow motion from 6 different angles at the very
Yes.
end, just to make sure you got your money's worth. Even if you weren't satisfied by the fact that our heroes are married at the church and are going off happily ever after, we have to have the DJ guy from the radio, who's been a constant nuisance, drive through a house in slow motion and into a pool, which was fun.
Well, it also ties into like radio culture, the CB kind of culture at that time too, right?
Well,
Doesn't
I
that
like
kind of,
this idea
yeah.
too about the unifying radio narrative. Like we see this in movies like The Warriors, where the narrator of the movie is the radio DJ, and they're keeping everybody abreast of what's going on, both in the world of the movie and as a voiceover, as a narrator for the audience.
It's been a while, but is A Vanishing Point kind of have a narrative hook like that too? I can't
That I
remember.
don't remember. I don't
Okay.
remember that. Yeah. But I think The Warriors was just a year later, and that's very much same
Regarding
style.
the title, this is not the only Roger Corman film where the title has taken on new life and new meaning in the modern age. Obviously Grand Theft
Right.
Auto, if you told anyone now, you mentioned Grand Theft Auto, they're not going to say, oh, of course, the 1977 Ron Howard film. They're going to say the video game. The Fast and the Furious, also another Roger Corman film from the 50s that he
Right.
sold the title to Universal when they made their mega franchise years later. So he's always got something in his pocket to make more money selling titles.
He had some great ideas. We got a nice comment here from Cobra Malibu Unlimited, who said, he quotes, Ron Howard pops the clutch and tells the world to eat my dust, which is the announcer from the Eat My Dust trailer, which was conceived by Joe Dante and Alan Arkish. So Joe Dante and Alan Arkish were quite the dynamic duo for Corman, where they worked for pennies to cut all of his trailers, and they did a phenomenal job of doing it. I think I sent you a trailer a while back for a New World effort that was a blaxploitation cash-in, which was called, oh boy, what's it called? It's a karate movie with some gal that what's it called?
I
But
can't
it's just
recall. Is it a Pam Grier movie?
No, it's not Pam Grier. It's somebody
No.
else. It's some girl who won some karate championship, but she happened to be black and a decent actress, and she could jump on a trampoline and do flips. So TNT Jackson, I believe it was.
Okay.
Really, really a phenomenal trailer. But yeah, Alan Arkish and Ron Howard would go on to be directors of note, especially Joe Dante, and they made a lot of great movies in the late 70s for Corman, including Hollywood Boulevard, which I watched as well, which which is incredibly entertaining. It stars a very compelling actress. Hold on one second. I'm gonna find her name.
I'm pleased to hear you say that, because I have not watched it, and when I was hearing about it, I thought, this is probably very dreadful in terms of
it's not
compilation stock footage.
Oh, it's quite fun.
Okay.
They work it in all very, very well, and it's very clever, and it's a great take on both the culture of Hollywood and Roger Corman especially, which is really what they're doing. And it's a really terrific little movie, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Of course, when all the stock footage is coming in, but it's really kind of entertaining to see how they integrate it, right? And it stars Candice Rialson, who was one of the nurses. She was in Candy Stripe Nurses 74. She was in the film Pets, which is sort of a movie about sex slavery. And then she's also in a movie called Chatterbox, which is somewhat notorious as an early kind of porn curio movie where a woman's vagina develops the ability to talk. But she's in this, and it's quite fun. She's quite beautiful, has a lot of great presence on screen. But that was directed by Joe Dante and Alan Arkish. It was one of their first efforts because it was very cheap, because they promised Roger they could use almost half of it as stock footage. But then Dante went on to direct Piranha, and Arkish did Rock and Roll High School, which I think is somewhat of a little bit of a classic in its own right. But Piranha, 1978, a clear Jaws ripoff written by John Sayles, a noted filmmaker who directed a movie that is very near and dear to my heart, Lone Star. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I'm not.
Sayles is a really great, interesting director. But he wrote the script, and Joe Dante directed. And what did you think?
Loved it. It was a great movie. This is actually the first time that I've ever seen it, though, which I'm a little embarrassed and ashamed to say.
Same.
You know why though? Actually, I remember I remember when the remake came out. I think it was in 2010, which was a very funny and engaging 3D kind of horror movie. And I remember reading about the old one, and I remember just people kept saying, "Oh, it's very campy and it's very silly and it's very funny." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not really interested in that." Not at all. This movie is very serious and very well done, very tense, scary, hits all the right marks. It's a Jaws ripoff, and it's proud of it. And I
Yes.
love that aspect to it.
I don't know how you could say that it's campy and sort of like the
No.
Piranha sequels, like these new ones, like went for the campiness
They
in
went for the
terms of like,
laughs completely.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
laughs
don't know
and
how
full on nudity, big boobs everywhere.
exactly, and there's a little bit of that in this, obviously. I mean,
Yeah,
there's some
nowhere
reasonable
near
moments.
what we're talking in the new ones, which I
Mm,
mean, those are fun, but this was a really good movie in and of itself.
yeah, and, I listened to Joe Dante's audio commentary, which is really tremendous. Every time Joe Dante does an audio commentary, it's always very good. It's not like the
Where
guy
is that
comes with
on? Because I don't think you have
Shout
this
Factory
one?
disc. Yeah,
Where Oh,
there's audio commentary on there.
okay. I don't know where. I guess I couldn't. I'm low tech here. I couldn't figure out how to get it then from the menu.
It's on there. Yeah, it's
I've
there.
gone full boomer here.
Yeah, you really have, but it's on there. I ripped it and listened to it as an MP3, but, like, Dante's audio commentaries are always very good, and he's done a few of them, and they're never like he's reading notes or, like, he's usually with somebody, and it's him making comments, and he's got great memories about the making of these movies, and Piranha was a tough shoot, right? But he has a great
Imagine, yeah.
story. I mean, this is one of the moments that sort of, we have Heather Menzies in the film, which who do you remember Heather Menzies? Do you remember what other film we've watched with her in it?
I can't
She was the
recall.
co-lead in Captain America, 1978, the TV film. She
No
was the
way.
girl. Yes, yes, she
I had
was.
no recollection of that whatsoever.
Yes, she was. So there's a moment in the movie where her and, the lead, Bradford Dillman,
Mhm.
noted cowboy television actor of the 50s and 60s. They have to escape from they're under military, the military's locked them down in a tent. And so she flashes her tits to one of the soldiers who's played by John Sayles in his cameo. But they're not hers because she came to
Oh,
Joe Dante and she goes, "Hey, look, I know I said in the contract I'd do this, but like I don't really want to do this anymore. So can we find somebody else?" So Joe Dante had went to the Waffle House and paid a waitress, and they set a camera up outside and just said, "All right, do it, go, all right, on, all right." And he goes, "One of the more humiliating moments of my life. Really, just not a great experience."
oh my god, that's
Um,
hilarious.
yeah.
But that
So
moment in the film is also one of the funniest moments of in an otherwise very serious movie where
a
she
movie where kids are getting eaten by piranhas.
that's also great about this movie is it has the balls to put kids in danger and actually have them be eaten by piranhas, which would be unheard of nowadays. You wouldn't
Right.
have the temerity to do that.
And you don't
Um,
want them, yeah, you don't want them to be eaten.
of course you don't want them to be eaten, but it ups the stakes a lot to have this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and there's
But
Paul
the part
Bartel.
the point I was trying to make
Yeah.
before was that when they're trapped in the tent and the guy tells her, "Go ahead and distract the guard." Well, she asks, "What if he's gay?" And he goes,
Right.
"Well, I'll distract him then."
Yeah, yeah. But the movie has a lot of great funny moments. But yeah, there's a part at the summer camp where the summer camp is set up. Bradford Dillman's daughter is at the summer camp, right? So there's a little bit of stakes there. And they're on the river, and the piranhas have been released through happenstance into the river, and they're super military grade piranhas that were developed to eat people in Vietnam. And they're in the water supply. And Paul Bartel plays this sort of overbearing, strict camp counselor guy. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, this guy's going to get totally chopped to bits by these piranhas because they're setting him up to be such a
Yeah.
villain, quote unquote, right? Because in these movies, that's what you expect, right? It sort of devolved into this type of thing in these slasher films, and then these,
You get
horror
your
movies.
comeuppance.
You get your
You have the
comeuppance,
character that you're waiting for them to get their comeuppance from the killer.
but he doesn't die. Instead, the final shot of him in the film is him weeping over like a body bag of a small child that's been eaten by the piranha. And I was
Well,
thinking to myself, wow, that's a lot. That's a
it's
little
a lot
heavier than I
deeper
thought.
than we realized. And he's giving
Yes.
off some kind of really creepy vibes too.
He's also in Hollywood Boulevard. He is a Corman regular, and he played a cameo in, he was in, Grand Theft Auto as the newlyweds that are in the sort of house trailer that gets stolen by, Clint Howard.
Oh,
That
okay.
was him. Yeah, he's in a lot of the Corman pictures, but,
Can we
uh,
talk about someone who we have not talked about yet, who is a Corman regular, Corman star, Yet out of the 4 movies that we
Oh,
chose to
yeah.
talk about today, he's only in this one, which is crazy. Is
There's
Dick Miller, of course, who's
Yeah.
absolutely phenomenal. Love Dick Miller a lot. A great guy, and he is one of the best characters in this movie, and as the analog for the mayor of Amityville, or of Amity in Jaws. As
There's
this
no
kind
gray
of,
area here, though. He's the bad guy. He's terrible.
he's the bad guy here. He does not give two craps about what's going on to the people until someone finally interrupts his important phone call and tells them what's wrong with the guests, and it's like, sir, they're being eaten by piranhas, and he's like,
oh, you get he goes, I don't want to hear one more word about fucking piranhas. I told you. Now do I hear it? He goes, they're eating the guests, sir.
they're eating the guests.
And then Dick Miller, look on his face. It's just perfect. But you know, it's fun to watch the piranhas. It's a very easy effect. I mean, it sounds tougher than what it, looks like on screen, but it's basically, they have a repeated shot of like a plate of like piranhas that swim through them. And then people kind of writhe around and we throw blood in the water, and then we hear over and over again as the sound of the piranhas gnawing.
This is the cheesiest one of the lot we're talking about today, only because the piranha effects are not really up to par. But
I was never amazed by
it. Doesn't take anything out of it for me. But I think if you were showing these movies to people who are not as into older films, I think you could get away with the other 3. Like completely. There's nothing in there that's very hokey, but this one people may, the special effects aren't up to par with 2025 standards,
But there's plenty of entertainment. I mean, when Brad
absolutely. I think it's phenomenal. Yeah.
He has to open up he has to kill all the piranhas by releasing sewage into the river because it'll destroy them. And he goes down to this sunken control room. It's fantastic. The sets they made underwater in a big Olympic-sized pool. And then when he told the co-star, his Heather Menzies, he goes, "Hey, pull me out of here in 2 minutes because I'll be out of breath." And when she yanks him on the boat with the rope and he flies free of the piranhas trying to eat him and crashes through the window underwater, it's spectacular. It's so cool.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a great little device. Really enjoyed it.
Just something very weird in this movie that I couldn't get my mind off of is when they go to the lab in the beginning of the movie, Heather Menzies and the guy. They see or they don't see it, but we see it. There's a weird stop motion creature that is just crawling around, and we never hear about it again or see it again. There's nothing. And what was that? What was going on there?
That was a Phil Tippett creation. They had a lot of great people on this, or not Phil Tippett. Sorry. Yes, a Phil Tippett creation. It was he was on the set for this. And I'm like, Phil Tippett worked on this movie. He fucking just got done doing Star Wars, right? It must've been, coincide at the same time, because also Pino Donaggio does the score. And then Rob Bottin did some of the makeup work.
Did they talk about it in the commentary, what that creature was supposed to be?
Oh, yeah. It was a Phil Tippett creation. And the idea, though it doesn't really come across, is that this is a really weird science laboratory and there's a lot of weird things going on. And at the end, they were trying to convince Roger to give them extra money to shoot an end stinger where that thing had grown to enormous size and was attacking the city. And that would have been the ending. But
I just thought it very strange that I figured that makes the most sense, but I just thought it was very strange that they show it just for that one scene, brief few seconds, and then nothing commented on again. It doesn't, not that they interact with it, for instance, and say, "Oh, there's this weird little creatures." We only as the audience see it.
Yeah, it just kind of appears, but I don't know. The movie was very well done. They were supposed to get a lot more money, and Roger cut the budget like 3 days before they shot. They dropped the cut budget like $400,000, so they had to scramble. But they did a great job. It's a great little fun movie.
Also, a lot of fun cameos. Keenan Wynn is in the movie as a drunk who gets his legs chewed off by piranhas. Kevin McCarthy from Invasion of the Body Snatchers is the scientist guy that they find at the research facility.
A guy who's also great in Joe Dante's Inner Space, which is probably his most underrated movie. Inner Space is incredible. And Kevin McCarthy is the villain. You should watch it right away. It's really fun.
And also Richard Deacon from the Dick Van Dyke Show. It shows up at the beginning of the movie as the head of the agency that Heather Menzies works for. And I was like, oh, it's Mel Cooley from the Dick Van Dyke Show. Fun stuff.
Oh, okay. Interesting. No, I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, really enjoyed it a lot. I was sorry that this took us so long to get to see that. I regret not having watched this one earlier.
I'm 100%. I felt the way about almost all these movies. I could have lived without seeing Dementia 13 or Grand Theft Auto. I get that you get the gist, but boy, Boxcar Bertha and Piranha are both terrific.
Yeah. So if you had to rate these in order, which is your favorite?
My most enjoyable viewing experience was Piranha, but I mean, it's the best movie is Boxcar Bertha.
I agree. Boxcar
Yeah,
Bertha at the top of my list for me. It's just there's so much there, and it is the highest quality film for all of these in terms of like the effort put in before the movie is even made. You know what I mean? Like Grand Theft Auto,
absolutely.
you can tell Ron is giving it his all, but he also like doesn't give a shit that it's just a piece of crap, piece of junk that he's making, and he knows it. He wants it to be good, but
Yeah,
he, doesn't really care. Marty is making like a passionate work, putting his soul into Boxcar Bertha.
and he's
You know?
probably digging out depth of emotion that
Yes.
weren't perhaps there originally, where the movie ends on such a dour, brutal note.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can't imagine that some other director in their hands would have made it a lot more exploitative and not as shocking. You know.
Yes. I mean, I think it's
So-
plenty exploitative enough, but it
Yes.
definitely feels on the caliber of a quote real movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Piranha, I think,
Close second for me, Piranha.
yeah, it looks good to me. You know, Dante was
Oh, yeah.
talking about some of the locations, the houses, which they just, Bradford Dillman, like his character's home was just some guy that lived there, and they go, "Hey, can we film in your house?" They didn't touch a thing. You know what I mean? So there's no set decoration or anything like that, but boy, not bad. But then I did watch Joe Dante's The Howling, which he was offered Humanoids from the Deep as a follow-up picture by Corman, but he was already getting more offers based on the strength of Piranha. And The Howling is a movie that it's sort of night and day, like cinematography wise. It just looks spectacular. It's so well lit, The Howling, and it kind of puts you in perspective of what a big budget back in the 80s and would look like compared to a Corman movie. But they have so much charm. And I think we could probably, though we sort of exhausted our discussion of these four movies in a relatively short amount of time. I'm surprised that we thought we would go longer, but
well, that's what I was, as we were leading up to this live stream today, I was thinking, yeah, there's a lot to talk about, but at the same time, there really isn't, because the depth of the film themselves, there's not a whole lot there. There's a lot more. It's I think more the behind the scenes or the making of the film or the context of the film is much more interesting than talking about the films themselves for a lot of
Sure.
these. Like Grand
I
Theft
could see
Auto, how
that.
much can you really talk about Grand Theft Auto? There's not a whole lot there.
Ron Howard's directorial style, as it pertains
no.
to Grand Theft Auto. No, he made a very slick piece of entertainment, and it was on a cheap budget, and it works.
When you mentioned about Ron Howard being literally able to make anything, I think that was exemplified when he made Solo, where he literally had to step into a movie that was half made and then just finish the job as a contract player, so to speak.
Yep. Which is surprising, but I mean, he'll do it.
But what's also kind of sad about his career is that he was making, big blockbuster type movies for a long time, and then it kind of he just fizzled out, and then he started making kind of less interesting films. Or
well, I just think people say that. They say that Ron Howard is having a tough time, and for a while there in the early 2000s, late 90s, he was making movies like Apollo 13 or A Beautiful Mind that were.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The era where he was making really, really good stuff, and then probably culminated with the Da Vinci Code, which is,
I have a soft spot for the Da Vinci Code. I know everybody likes to dog on that movie. The two sequels, I saw the second one, but I don't remember much about it. I didn't like it. But I do.
Demons is not bad, but
yeah,
never saw Inferno.
Frost Nixon is relatively compelling.
But that's not on the level of being I'm talking about him making a Hollywood blockbuster type movie, like on a Spielberg level, which is what he was doing before.
Right.
He was making movies like How the Grinch Stole Christmas or Apollo 13 that were like on that level, and then he kind of slowed down and made. But you can make personal small films that are still, culturally.
Would you call? See, I haven't seen In the Heart of the Sea, though I heard it was tremendous. I have not seen it.
I don't know. That looked really boring to me. Sorry.
Rush was good, and I really enjoyed
Hillbilly Elegy.
13 Lives.
Hillbilly Elegy was really good.
I thought it was good. I thought it was fine. Everyone hated it in that movie. I thought it was fine.
Really? Everyone hated it?
Everyone hated it. It's got like 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. It got horrible.
You know what that's all about.
I know a little bit. It got trashed. I thought it was, good, but I actually really like 13 Lives.
Okay.
It was I thought that was well done, even though it was a direct streaming kind of a procedural, but I enjoyed it, and I like Ron Howard. Seems like a genuinely interesting kind of guy. I mean, what a great career he's had
Absolutely.
over the decades. But boy, Roger died earlier this year, and we or last year, and we
Last year.
commemorated his passing by talking about targets. But I think that Roger has a lot more we could mine if we were to watch like the Nurse movies and just have a hoot about it. I think that'd be fun.
I would like to do the Edgar Allan Poe films for like Halloween. I think that would
I
be
agree.
great.
That would be really cool. Yeah, because
Yeah,
lots of
Mask of the Red
those
Death is one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. I even have the original movie poster in the other room on the
Oh, do
wall.
you?
Yeah.
You want
It's
to open it
a
up for
beautifully horrific work of art with Vincent Price's head
Oh
with
yeah,
all of
yeah.
these
I've seen that.
writhing and tortured souls. It's very demonic and creepy, and it's a wonderful piece for my living room. Sorry.
I agree with you. No, I think it's we had Trembling Colors say that Ron Howard is a middle of the road crowd pleaser guy.
Yeah.
You know what? Have you ever seen Night Shift, his follow-up film to Grand Theft Auto?
I have not.
Oh, terrific early 80s comedy with Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton. One of Michael Keaton's funniest performances, in my opinion. It's about two guys that run a morgue and they turn it into a brothel. Very funny, very genuine movie. But I would say Apollo 13 is a genuinely good film.
Oh yeah,
Gonna watch it, I've
Backdraft
seen
as
it,
well.
but yeah. Yeah. Well, you want to open up to a Q&A with the audience?
Yeah.
What's that?
Beautiful Mind.
Beautiful Mind. Anybody have any questions for us? So I've sort of exhausted my even though I read a whole book on Roger Corman, which was very interesting, by the way. The one I read, I can't attest to the one you read, which is his autobiography.
Oh, it's really good. Excellent book. I mean, just the production and financial aspect of his career and how he did things is probably one of the more fascinating things for me about how getting started, he talks about other independent producers, how you make a movie and you have to wait in order to get the money back in order to finance the next film. So you have to wait for the returns and on your investment and all that. Well, he got around that by getting advances from the distributor based on he had to put up the money for like the first one or two movies. But then after the success of those, he was able to convince people to give him enough advance money to make more movies and to keep that cycle going. Because if you stop production, basically you're dead. So by keeping in perpetuity the wheels turning, the press is running, so to speak, he was able to get going and make the monumental success that he became. And I mean, I love hearing about how stingy and cheap he is, just even on a personal level, like not wanting to do long distance phone calls, or like even when he got engaged to his wife, he proposed to her and then he had to leave town to go to the Philippines for shooting. And he never called her for like a week. And she finally called him or he called her and they're like, "Are we still getting married?" And he's like, yeah, of course. Did you pick a date? And so they
didn't want to make a long distance call.
He didn't want to make a long distance phone call from the Philippines. He didn't want to spend the money on that.
Oh boy. And he's an Irish Catholic too, the cheapest guy in Hollywood. You wouldn't think. But
and also the only he loves to talk about the only movie he ever lost money on. Are you familiar with that one? I'd love to watch it
with William
Shatner, The Intruder, which was a racial politics movie from the Deep South. Looks fascinating, looks great. I would love to watch that.
Yeah, it looks like a well done movie. It just seems a little
heavy-handed.
Yeah,
well, Roger
actually,
he was a liberal, so he was meant something. It's a lofty movie. It sounds like a lofty movie, good premise, with societal benefit, I would say.
On the note about cheapness, in the Beverly Gray book, which is quite good, I would recommend you guys read it if you're interested in Corman. Talks about his daughter, who was also somewhat involved in the business. They went and visited Canon Pictures back when they were really rocking and rolling in the 80s, and they had a beautiful office. And his daughter mentioned to him, "Boy, we make more money than these guys. We're doing well. We have an office?" He would have art students, if he liked a painter, he would have art students make up like a forgery of like a high art piece or something that was very similar, and he would hang those all on the wall in the office. And his wife actually got him a real painting of his favorite artist, and he made her give it away. He didn't want it. He was like, "Nope, don't spend any money on that." So yeah, man,
they love to ask him about like, what would you do if you had the Hollywood budget to make, if you had $100 million to make a movie? And his answer is just so perfect for everything about him. He's like, no, if they gave me $100 million to make a movie, I would split it in half and I would make one $50 million movie. And then I would take the other 50 million and I would make, either two $25 million movies or four $10 million movies or five $10 million movies. And he's like, we could stretch that money out to make the 50 million look like 100 million.
Yep. No, it's
maybe we need that nowadays because we're seeing, ballooning budgets out of control and the end product looks like trash.
Well, and I'm not Mr. Communist either, but he does make a point where in one of his interviews he gave where he goes, frankly, I think it's obscene to be spending this much money on some of these things. $200 million. Everything costs $200-300 million. And they're, forgotten.
Do we really, is it really worth society that we spend $150 to $200 million on Thunderbolts?
Right.
Just saying.
Yeah. That's incredible. It's, but yeah, I think we should talk about next time if we continue down the Corman path, which I think we should. I think it'd be fun to watch some of his nurse movies, but his 80s efforts, like he got to working with Jim Wynorski, which many people are familiar with on movies like Chopping Mall and the the Slumber Party Massacre series, when he started making more and more movies direct to video, which was fun to hear that he was able to pivot. I mean, his business model was so heavy in drive-ins, and he was able to make that move to video cassette, and then still to this day, or till the day he died, making things like Sharktopus or whatever that were kind of. I mean, it's sort of sad Channel. Sad that he started kind of like aping like the Asylum. Towards the end. Is
the Asylum still around? Is that still a thing? I don't know. It was big for a while with Sharknado and all that stuff, but.
Yeah, when they had Sci-Fi Channel on their team, they were doing well.
Well, what's also fascinating during all this research and watching these movies is, you kind of have a preconceived notion about what genre he really dabbled in. You think horror, science fiction, and it's like that is just the tip of the iceberg here. There is so much more to it beyond that. We're talking about, biker gang movies. We're talking about women in prison movies, nurses movies, all the range. Youth on the run, car movies, everything. There's so much. He was basically whatever was hot at the time. Let's make that, and we'll milk it till it's dry, until it's no longer commercially viable. Just keep making them, keep cranking them out, and it's impressive.
It is impressive.
What would be really cool, I think, also as a show would be the Wild Angels with the Trip, and then Easy Rider and like 5 Easy Pieces, because the connection is, very apparent when you go back and look.
Those guys that went on to graduate, if you will, from the Roger Corman school,
and the stories about the Wild Angels and working with the Hells Angels are also just some of the most fascinating and wild stories. And it's like what an interesting life for someone to have to do all this stuff. He had a hit put out on him by the Hells Angels,
right?
So,
and he was such a sort of well-mannered and mild-mannered dude.
Very stoic, very mild-mannered guy. I mean, he looks like a total square, in all the right ways and all the good, I don't mean that
sounds
any
like
disrespect, but great memory too. And sharp as a tack up until his late 90s, up until he died. Did I send you the thing where he was with Joe Bob Briggs on stage at the drive-in?
No, I should watch that though, but I should have sent you also when he was on Conan O'Brien's show, probably in like 2014 or 15.
Oh, okay. I may have seen that a while ago. I was watching the one with him on Letterman in like the 80s or 90s. And that was also quite good.
Okay. Maybe I'll stick some of those in here on the audio version of the show, which you can find anywhere you find audio podcasts, iTunes, Spotify. If you enjoy this show right now, go out to iTunes or Spotify, find the Film Journal podcast where you can watch these live streams, or listen to them rather, as an MP3, and please like or give us 5 stars or write a review. That would be huge to help us grow on the podcast platform. Lots of people like to tune in for the live streams, but most people just want to listen to these in audio form. And often I go back and edit music and little clips in for your listening pleasure. So be sure to do that, please. Ryan, any
It's been
thoughts?
a pleasure as always.
Yeah, that was fun. I have a few ideas, but Barbarian flicks. Right. Yeah, there were some of those.
Death Stalker, right?
Stalker.
There's 4 of those at least.
We could just do this all year. Just different Corman cycles, different things.
I'd be down for that.
I would too. Maybe we should just return to it every once in a while. This was a good place to start, though. I think this was a good place to start. So thank you. Nice shirt. Appreciate it very much. That's why you have to tune into the live streams, because you can't see this on.
Yeah, you don't get this with just the audio. You
don't get this with just the audio. No, but okay, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Check out my new review on Small Soldiers and my newest video on Karcher Vision. They need some help. They're really flops. Boy, it's been tough out there.
The algorithm, it's killer.
Yeah, it's been tough on me. All right, Ryan, it's been cool. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.